I present to you the interview series titled LGBT Rights in India. In this series, we interview individuals involved in the decriminalization of Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code that made homosexuality a crime in India. This series is presented to you in collaboration between JURIST Legal News and Commentary based out of Pittsburgh, United States and Humsafar Trust, India through the Likho Fellowship. Sit back, relax and enjoy this interview.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our viewers. I am Sambhav Sharma, the India correspondent and journalist for Jurist based in New Delhi. Today with us we have Dr. Prasad Dandekar. Dr. Dandekar is a radiation oncologist based in Mumbai and heads the Department of Radiation Oncology at Sri Agent Reliance Foundation Hospital in Mumbai. He's also the founder of Health Professionals for Queer Indians, which is focused on sensitizing healthcare professionals to the healthcare needs of LGBTQ community by organizing training, conferences, and educational material. So it is also instrumental in organizing a formal statement by the Indian Psychiatric Society, which for the first time stated that homosexuality is not a mental illness and it should be decriminalized. This letter was then placed before the Honorable Supreme Court of India and quoted in the landmark judgment of Navdeep Singh Johar versus Union of India in 2018, which effectively decriminalized homosexuality in India. We are honored to have you with us here, Doctor, and thank you so much for agreeing to this interview.
Thank you, Sambhav, for inviting me. And at the onset, I want to just make a note that the letter that the Indian Psychiatric Society issued was a joint effort by many, many, many people. I was just, I just sort of connected, the right people to them. And it was very kind of the Indian Psychiatric Society. And that judgment was quoted by 3 of the honorable judges out of the bench of 5. So I was just incidentally there. It was primarily a work of a lot of members of the Indian Psychiatric Society who sort of fought against all the negative voices in the room and issued that letter.
Thank you, Doctor, and we recognize and we appreciate the efforts of everybody who was a part of this movement. So as you rightly said, you certainly have, and we are somebody who would say that you have certainly achieved a lot when it comes to LGBT rights and mental health. So given the fact that Jurist is a legal platform, we have more or less always covered the legal perspective of the movement. But having you with us here today, would you like to tell our viewers about your social work and how it began?
So I wouldn't call it much of a social work. It is something that I do, on the side because I feel it is the right thing to do. In my case, I currently run 2 initiatives. One is called as a Health Professionals for Queer Indians. And as you rightly said, our aim is to primarily sensitize healthcare professionals to the healthcare needs of the LGBT community. As a part of that, we've conducted many conferences and during the COVID times, many webinars, and we're sort of training medical students, healthcare professionals to be sensitive and acknowledge the presence of the LGBT community in their patient population. The reason why we do this is we believe that if you train one doctor to be sensitive to the LGBT community, you are actually impacting thousands and thousands of lives at one shot, because that doctor is going to see many members of LGBT community across her or his or their lifetime, and it will have a very long-term impact. And of course, LGBT community has, as anybody else would have any health issues, they would go to the doctors, and many times these members of LGBT community do not get the right attention that they need. So for example, you go into your doctor's cabin and say you are seeking mental health support for, say, the depression, or you've had a recent breakup and you're trying to deal with that. And a young man goes into the doctor's cabin and doctor says, so what happened between you and your girlfriend? And that itself, then the person then closes up, because he says, oh, the doctor is saying that I should have a girlfriend, but I actually had a boyfriend. So those are the sort of things that we are trying to address, that at the very basic level, helping the healthcare professionals to understand that not every patient that who walks into your room is heterosexual, and not every patient who walks into your room is cisgender. The second initiative that I run is in collaboration with veteran LGBT activist Ashok Rao Kavi. Ashok has been one of the first member of the LGBT community who came out and has been fighting the war against 377 and many other things. He's also the founder of Humsafar Trust, in collaboration with which this interview is being conducted. So Teenagers is the other initiative, which is basically a support group for older men who are about the age of 50. And so under that, we sort of arrange various meetings, arrange various programs for these people. We also have a very active WhatsApp group. And during COVID, of course, all our meetings were virtual, but now we have also started meeting physically. Some of these meetings are just for fun, like going out for a cup of tea, going out for a movie, going out for a nature trail. And some of the events are more educational. So how do you take care of your heart problems? How do you take care of your wealth? How do you take care of your legal rights and things like that? So the aim is to build a community of people who can support each other, because beyond a certain age, you don't really make new friends. So we are providing a platform where people can come together, make new friends, and hopefully that will reduce the loneliness epidemic that is, all over around us.
And if I may say so, these initiatives are really commendable, and I feel for a community that has for so long been marginalized. I think it's in fact we are a few decades late, but at least better late than never to have these support groups for help.
Incidentally, I want to just point out here that Teenagers is a group that we started here around, I think, 4.5 years ago. And at that time, we didn't know what to do, because it started primarily because Ashok kept saying that I have become old and I need support and we need to do something about it. So it started with a very personal need. And we started it. And at that point, we tried to see what are the best practices. And we looked all over the internet and we could hardly find anything. There are hardly any groups like this across the globe. We could find some small little thing in US, one group here and there. But we had to really learn it ourselves. And I think last year, Sir Ian McKellen in UK then announced that they are also starting a group like this in the UK.
And I think you're absolutely right when you say that these initiatives are more often than not born out of necessity. They're born out of a lack of resources. Because had there been initiatives like this in place, we probably wouldn't have ever faced a problem like this. So I think it has to start from somewhere, and I'm glad that it has started. Uh, but my question now is, as I mentioned before, while the legal community has in very detail covered the struggle of the LGBTQ community, be it proceedings in courts or generally consultations with lawyers and the law that has sort of changed and paved the way for the community. Very little is said about the medical community's involvement in the movement. So we would like to know straight from you how the medical community has been involved in the movement, and how do they view the trajectory that has sort of gone from LGBTQ people, like you rightly said, not even being recognized, where doctors do not even know whether whether heteronormative is so pervasive that it's very difficult for people to come out and sort of discuss with doctors, and doctors, mind you, we discuss the most intimate of our details with them. So what has been the role of the medical community as per you?
So let me put these things in perspective. When I started my MBBS in 1995, which was whatever, 27 years ago, our books did not talk about homosexuality at all. There was no talk of sexuality at all. And there was one book of forensic medicine which actually very explicitly said homosexuality is a crime and homosexuality is unnatural. Those books have not changed yet. So the current students also get to know the same things. Thankfully, now there is so much of awareness about the LGBT community otherwise that we are seeing that the young medical students are very adept at learning these things. And every time I have conducted a training for medical students, I have always received a very good response from them. Having said that, there are incidences which are quite heartbreaking. Recently, I was connected. Somebody contacted me. This young boy, family of doctors, and he's queer. He himself is a medical student and was going through a lot. He found it very difficult to deal with some of the stuff. So he went to his head of psychiatry to seek help. That psychiatry head, instead of helping him, told him that this is wrong, this is a sin, this is a crime, you cannot be like this. Then that individual called up the student's parents and told them that you need to put your son through a corrective course. This is today's India, and this is today's healthcare. But there is a spectrum. So at one spectrum, you have people like this, and at the other spectrum, you have people who are extremely welcoming and extremely supportive. The healthcare industry as such is also, it does not exist in isolation. It exists as a mirror image of the community. The doctors are also humans. They just because they become doctor, they don't become superhumans. Although the doctors believe that they're superhumans, but that's crap. So we also get influenced by the community, right? So, for example, 25, 30 years ago, the way you looked at a woman is very different from the way you look at the working woman today, because all the great work that the feminists have done. And our mindset have changed because the society has changed. So similarly, the doctors will also change their mindset once the society changes. And how does the society change? The change, I think, starts, one of the first change that needs to happen is a legal change. That before 377 was written down on 6th of September 2018, my constant battle was everywhere I approached, they said, we cannot do any event also because this is a criminal activity. So medical colleges, hospitals would, bluntly refuse to do anything with us. It was only that the law changed. Then people started opening up. Then people started, okay, let's do something. Something needs to be done. The DNI now, the diversity and inclusion part has become, even if you look at the corporate world, that has become a very important function of most of the corporates now from the LGBT point of view after 377. Earlier, DNI was basically, inclusivity for women. So that has also changed. So what I'm trying to say is that as the society will change, the health professionals will also change. And some initiatives such as the one that we are running will also make a difference. For us to imagine that the law changed on 6th September and 7th September, everybody in the world should be accepting of homosexuality and homosexual individuals is a bit of a utopia, and that's not going to be possible. So we need to work on it. And so now the Kerala High Court or Chennai High Court, I forget, has given the mandate to change the medical curriculum also. So those, there is work going on that front also. So things will change.
Right. In fact, when you mention the books in your curriculum and how they said that it's a crime to be anything but heterosexual. I am reminded of books in my past, even in schools and colleges, where at a very nascent stage also, all the books have a very binary form of reference. It's always he or she. There's no mention of they. And even in laws, for that matter, today I feel that even the Indian Penal Code and so many laws in India, have this sort of binary reference. So you're right when you say that the change has to take place on a very grassroots level. And you're right, it's a utopian world where we think of everything will sort of fall into place. It's a constant struggle. And I'm glad that the struggle is at least started and we're on sort of a progressing phase. Doctor, you also talked about a very disheartening incident about this particular individual who saw his psychiatrist or their psychiatrist. I'm sorry. So my question to you is, what was your role in, or what has your role been in convincing the medical community or even people in general? And you mentioned HPQI. Could you please take us through the initiatives of HPQI and how they've worked to sensitize people in general about the movement?
Yeah. So I see, through whatever work that we have been done, I see there are three types of people who are extremely accepting of LGBT community, but need to be trained on how to deal with them. The second component is people who are tolerant of them, but are not very sure, what's this? Maybe is this right? Maybe is this wrong? But everybody says it's cool, so maybe it's okay. That's the second part. And the third part is people who are extremely against the LGBT community. In my impression is that that component is a smaller component of the healthcare community. I have been focusing on the first two components because the sort of job that I do, sort of work that I do, basically involves arranging conferences and arranging webinars. Now, if you are an extreme homophobe, you're not going to register for this webinar. So I will never get to see them, right? I have awareness about it. So I'm not saying that I'm changing the world. I'm saying that I'm making a small difference. In people who are already accepting of LGBT community, we are training them better to be better allies. And people who are sitting on the fence, we are training them to be allies. So with that awareness, I carry on what I do, and we all can make a small change, and every small change goes a long distance. Now here, the work that I find is very interesting, especially with the medical students. Now, when I was a medical student, I first of all was confused about my sexuality, because I'm talking about 1990s when internet had just come. There was no Google and Facebook and whatever. We had no access to information. So I did not even know what was happening with me. Is this right, wrong, phase, not phase, permanent, whatever. So that's not the case today. Today's students have access and they are reasonably sure on many occasions about what they are going through. But they are not sure about their peers. Will my peers accept me? What I have realized is when you conduct such webinars or speeches for the medical students, students who are already from the LGBT community then find courage to come out, because there is an icebreaker event that has happened. A conversation about gender and sexuality has started in their peer group, which they were unable to start on most occasions. I've also seen cases where there's a queer individual who has come out to their friends, but the friends are feeling confused and not understanding what exactly is happening, and they attend this event and then they say, you know what, now I understand my friend even better. So I think the impact is twofold. The doctors will be able to help their queer patients better, but also queer doctors will be able to accept themselves and their community will be able to accept themselves better, which is a very important aspect, because that will ensure that these doctors then achieve their maximum potential. I'll tell you one example of a young medical student who got in touch with me recently, and I had no answer to his query. He said that I have always been, very good student. He's currently in a very good medical college. He's in his second year MBBS, and he's saying, I'm unable to study. because I'm so stressed about my sexuality, I'm so confused about my sexuality that I'm unable to study and my grades are slipping. Now, this is terrible because this is a bright young man who's going to ruin his career because the perceived lack of acceptance, and I say perceived lack of acceptance by his peers and his family. He hasn't even found out. Will his friends accept him? So, of course, I told him to seek counseling, if required, seek a psychiatrist help, and things like that. But can we not prevent this? Why should a young man, or for that matter, why should anybody go through this? And this is what I feel we need to change, that everybody should get an equal opportunity to reach their maximal potential. There should be no hindrance to do that. And here, the problem is that actually there is no hindrance as such. He's worried about the possible hindrance. He's not even found out. So it's even more, sad. So that's something that we need to change.
I think it's the fear of perception. It's the fear of inclusion or not being included for that matter. That sort of which brings me to a very important topic, Doctor. Mental health, as we all know, is a very important consideration when we talk about LGBT rights. In fact, I read how you interviewed certain queer individuals whom the society perceived as heterosexual men, and based on societal perception they ended up in marriages with women. um, and I can only wonder how these individuals have to are forced to live in a constant environment where they're not comfortable in their own skin, where they're not being recognized. So my question is, after coming across such instances, what, according to you, is the policy stance when it comes to catering to the community? I mean, is the government perceptive or receptive of this? Are non-governmental organizations and campaigns? Is the society, and just like you mentioned, there are different parts of the spectrum. Some are tolerant, some are encouraging about it, some are completely discouraging about it. How then do you see an inclusive society forming tomorrow where mental health, because mental health in general is also considered a taboo. In fact, regardless of them being queer, straight, or their sexual orientation, mental health, the question when it comes up, people are sort of wary about it. So, how do we then form a society? And I know this is a very, very broad question, but how do we form a society where not only are you addressing mental health, but in relation to queer rights? And do you think there is a way?
So, mental health is integral to our lives, and it is, in my opinion, a basic human right to have a, a possibility of good mental health. Now, currently in the LGBT community, what is happening is we see a lot of mental health issues. Now, the mental health issues are not because of these individuals are queer, but because of the ostracization and discrimination that they face from the society. So there is a lot of loneliness, there is a lot of guilt. The guilt could be like, oh, I'm different, I have brought shame to my family, or I have not given a grandchild to my parents, or there could be shame that I am less than other people. I'm not complete. There could also be other issues such as depression, suicide, depression because of all the problems that may be going around in the house. There may be problems at work, and so many things. Now, all these problems will eventually ease up if there is acceptance from the society. I did a survey of married gay men a few years ago, and it was heartbreaking. It was horrible because my impression was that, oh, married gay men, maybe they are marrying because they want to take it easy, and it was really heartbreaking. We currently do not have any data on how many, you know, how many married gay men, how many married men are actually gay, But if you look at the trend in India, I would not be surprised if more than 95% of gay men in India are married to women. People such as me who are gay, out, have a partner, are minority of minority of minority. There'll be like, very, very few people like me. There'll be more of us in metros and very less when it goes to rural India. So basically, everybody who's gay, for all practical purposes, is married to women. And why is that happening? Because the society, of course, looks down upon anything which is not heterosexual or anything that is not cisgender. Number two, again, legal problems. Once the law changes, I think things will change. Now, the law does not allow two individuals of the same sex to enter into any contract which is like marriage, whether you call it civil union, whether you call it whatever marriage, whether you call it anything else, civil partnership. So now there is a court case coming up in Delhi High Court on 30th of November, and I'm sort of in touch with the lawyers and seeing what help medical community can offer. I'm working on some of those things. Now, hopefully, if that happens, then there will be a change. A young man will then be able to tell their parents that, you know what, I will get married, but to a man of my choice. Or a young woman may be able to tell their parents that, yes, I am definitely going to getting married to my girlfriend. So these things are important. The law has to change, then the society will change. So we are hoping that the Honorable High Court will hear our plea. Like, for example, in my case, I have been with my partner for 17 years. We have been living together for last, I think, 11 years. And who's he on legal terms? No one. He is no one to me. If tomorrow I fall sick and I go into a hospital, he cannot even sign my consent, let alone any legal rights such as opening a bank account or buying property together, taking a loan together, nothing. He does not exist. If I die and in my will I write my property to him, my family can contest that why are you giving away your property to your friend? Because he's at best a friend, right? And I built my life together with him. We've invested 17 years of our life with each other. And the law says it doesn't exist. So that needs to change. And that will overall increase the acceptance of the queer individuals in the society. That will then have an impact on improvement in mental health for everyone else. It is a slow process. It's going to take a long time. And I give example that, you look at what happened to the feminist movement. We're still struggling to giving equal rights to women, right? And Mrs. Phule, Savitribai Phule, opened the first school for women in Pune 175 years ago. It's been 175 years. And where are we?
We're still struggling.
We're still struggling. So LGBT community needs to chill. It's going to take time. It will happen, but it will take time. And the legal community has to take the first step.
I think it's right to say that it's slow paced. The only thing that matters is at least it's moving forward. Or at least that's what we want to think.
And the change is much faster. So while Savitribai Phule's work is still in progress, the LGBT community's work will be much faster, primarily because of the internet and the way the world is connected now.
Right.
Anything that happens anywhere in the world now, instantly you get to know. So, for example, if I share something which is pro-LGBT on my social media, everybody around me gets to think about it. So there is a constant reminder of these things. So the change will be faster. It won't take 175 years, but it will take some time.
Right. I think information dissemination is one of the biggest tools today. The fact that I'm sitting here, I can get to know about pride movements and marches happening in the States. And looking at that, I want to replicate that in India. That's something that sort of contributes to the movements which the feminist movement initially did not have. So you're absolutely right when you say the technology also is playing a huge role in this. And you mentioned the Delhi High Court proceedings, which India asked for marriage rights for queer people. Doctor, so in that case, the advocates for the petitioners also said that the natural consequence of the Navdeep Singh Johar judgment should also be that marriage rights are also accrued to the LGBTQ plus community. It's not just a union that you've permitted. Firstly, it's not something that you should permit or not permit. It's their right. And now that it's been decriminalized, all rights sort of fall from it, not just of an association, but also of marriage, of adoption, of education, of just being recognized in the society. So I'm definitely hopeful that on the 30th of November, some progression happens. But till then, I would now want to address the proceedings of the Navdeep Singh Johar case. As we mentioned in the beginning, your letter, which you wrote with your colleagues, was quoted by the Supreme Court of India in Navdeep Singh Johar versus Union of India, the judgment that decriminalized Section 377 partly to allow same-sex unions. Would you like to enlighten our viewers on the contents of the letter and the sort of the trajectory it took and the contribution it made to the case?
So basically, the letter had two important pieces of information. One, the Indian Psychiatric Society very clearly mentioned that homosexuality is not unnatural. And the second is a recommendation that they made that it should be decriminalized. These are the two important aspects of it. Now, when you have a case like this, which is whether something is natural or unnatural, of course, the medical fraternity plays an important role in this. And Indian Psychiatric Society is the apex body when it comes to that in India, because they are the ones who are sort of looking after the mental health for all of us. And their letter, because of that, carried a lot of weight in the eyes of the Honorable Supreme Court. So that actually, I think, made a huge difference in getting them aware and also giving them a medical support of sort to the judges, I guess, to say that, not only on the basis of legality or social justice, but also on the basis of the current evidence in the medicine, what we are doing is the right thing to do. So I think that makes a huge difference. And it always, I mean, the medical fraternity will play an important role when we have cases like that. And the legal and the medical fraternity has to work together on these.
Doctor, talking about something called conversion therapy, usually what happens is gay individuals are scared of sort of coming out. So then they're forced to convert and sort of, adhere to the heteronormative pattern of the society. So in that sense, I'm asking, is that something that, I mean, of course, it shouldn't be allowed, but is that something that is still legal in India? That's something that is being practiced? Have you had any experience?
Yeah. So conversion therapy is a shameful blotch on the medical fraternity in India. It is still being practiced at many places. Recently, we had a very sad case, if you remember, of an individual from Kerala who then committed suicide because of they were forced into conversion therapy. First of all, conversion therapy has been completely debunked by almost all the important medical bodies, international as well as national. Even Indian Psychiatric Society has issued a letter that conversion therapy is completely not to be practiced because it is not effective at all. You cannot convert an individual from, say, heterosexual to homosexual or homosexual to heterosexual. These practices are barbaric and illegal. Having said that, there are doctors who are doing it. I know of doctors who were doing it in Mumbai until very recently, very, very recently. And these are, very respectable psychiatrists. So why do they do it is an interesting question, and I wish to ask them that do they do it because they truly believe in it? If that is the case, then what happens to the evidence-based medicine? Do they not believe in evidence-based medicine? Or they are so focused on malpractices and making money that they actually just don't care and they would do anything to get some more money? It's an interesting question, and I don't have an answer to that. But conversion therapy is something which should not be practiced, and I urge not only to the medical fraternity but to the parents to not force their children into such things, and even to queer individuals to resist it and not go through this. It's an extremely traumatic experience which achieves nothing but scarring lives. It is terrible.
Right? I think it's more to do with not accepting reality. It's more to do with sticking to what you think is right and not wanting to sort of evolve as a society. But you're absolutely right when you say that it's an abysmal practice and something that should be discouraged on all fronts. Now, coming to the sort of the role of the medical community, Doctor, where does the medical community stand when it comes to being inclusive in their approach? Now, we've talked about the society needing to be inclusive, but do medical colleges and hospitals provide sensitivity training when it comes to mental health, just like HPQI has been doing? And even physical health support for transitioning individuals. Is there some sort of a campaign or some sort of training modules provided for these individuals? What sort of a role is the medical community playing?
So there's no sort of a centralized training or anything that has been going on. There are some initiatives like HPQI, and there are some colleges who are doing it on their own. Again, it depends on the professors who are there in the colleges, and if they take the initiative, they are doing it. There are some public as well as private hospitals where gender reassignment surgeries are being done with great success. So again, it really depends on who is the doctor who is doing it and what sort of motivation do they have. It has not percolated through the strata yet, but I think there are positive changes that are happening. Um, like for example, the government finally saying, the High Court finally saying that the medical curriculum needs to change, and there are other individuals who are actually working at a more grassroots level of actually making a new curriculum. So those efforts will bear fruits in coming time.
Right, and I think that
And we need to remember that it's been just 3 years since decriminalization.
right.
So it's still, a lot of work in process, um, and it will happen. I think in another, 5 to 10 years, we'll see a huge change.
Right. And that in itself is huge because, as you rightly said, the changes and the progression that's happening vis-a-vis the LGBTQ community is much more. It's faster than all the struggles that we've had before. I mean, it doesn't mean that it needs to be trivialized or that there's no struggle. There's a long way to go, but surely it's just a steady move forward. With this, we come to an end of this interview, Doctor. But before we leave, do you have any parting remarks for our international viewers and viewers in India?
Yeah, I think what I want to emphasize is that one of the reasons why the LGBT community is suffering today, or for that matter, any minority is suffering today, is because of our belief that majority is right. I just want all of you to think for a minute that all of us are in majority in some parts of our life and in minority in some part of our life. It's not possible, or rather, it would be very rare for somebody to be always in majority, right? So we need to look at life in a more compassionate manner, and rather than finding out how we are different, we need to focus on how all of us are similar. And that is what will change the world. All these, the activism and everything is minor details. It is all at a operational level. At a more fundamental level, when humans, and again, this is utopia, I don't think it will ever happen because animals that we are never going to change. But if it were to happen, when we accept each other as, who we are, rather than trying to focus on how different we are, the world will be a much better place to live. And for legal professionals, I wish to urge that while you may become a fancy lawyer having a corner office maybe in New York, please don't forget people who are suffering, and you have taken an oath to be there for them. So while you may be doing your practice and you may be a very successful lawyer, I urge you to think about, what am I doing for people who are not privileged? And it's a very personal question. Somebody may say, I'm going to start an NGO and donate all my earnings to that. And somebody may say, you know what, I'll not charge my next client who's poor. Any change, any effort is equally important. I think the impact that one, if you say, for example, help somebody who's poor and help them to get justice, the impact that you will have on that person's life is you cannot put it into money or value. It is life-changing experience for that individual, and that is what we need to focus on. Let's not look at impact. Impact is what everybody talks about. What is your impact? I believe that impact is making a difference, a small difference maybe, in one person's life. Anything above that is bonus. So if we focus on this, making a small change, small acts of kindness, you don't need to do big things. A small act of kindness, the world will be a much better place to live.
I think you're right. I think the change needs to start from within. It's more of a personal effort first, and then we come together as a community. And these are very wise words, Doctor. Thank you so much. Thank you for giving us the time, and I'm sure that a lot of people will benefit from what we've learned from you today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me over.
Thank you.